Charles, I hope that people don't think that we're making light of a serious matter with today's image of who killed Charlie Kirk, but I know you are a big Roger Rabbit fan. So we did this.
Well, I think we should tell the crowd that, this is I've been a secret apprentice of Jason, and actually I did this poster in my factory. No, of course not.
It was your idea, though, not to shift any blame, but I was a little reluctant to make a cartoon, but I think it is appropriate. And, I'll tell you, Charles, it's interesting because you're not the only person who is, let's say, skeptical of Erica Kirk, and anytime somebody kind of like ascends so soon after the death of somebody. And so what I did was, I went and looked at like, hey, how often is a husband and wife, like how often is the spouse the suspect in a murder? And I think you might be pretty surprised, or maybe not, but I actually found this whole report from this guy's from Duke Law or something, husband-wife homicide, and it's something like 10%.
Oh, I would have thought it's higher than that.
Yeah. Well, what they said was that it's pretty frequent that the perpetrator is somebody that the person knows, simply because the average person just has no motive to kill a random stranger. But spouse-on-spouse murder is like 10.5% or 9.5%, some, to me, shockingly high number. And then it's more men killing the wives, which I don't condone, but I definitely understand. And again, I'm not saying Erica Kirk did anything, but it's an interesting question to explore, and the suspicion is not misplaced, is what I'm getting at.
Well, if you think about the, let's start first with the left-wing political spectrum. I mean, when the Soviet Union was a thing, and communist China is still a thing, but when both of them were things, it was accepted that the United States government could go after anybody who was suspected of being part of the communist-supported left wing in America. It was accepted. Nobody thought, gave a hoot about it, right? And so it's not a shock to imagine that over time, those hippies who thought they were just free-loving and having a good time could become, over decades, corrupt and actually enthrall to the Communist Party of China, communists, and specifically to the Communist Party of China, which has been on a upward tear, since 1949. I mean, when we said it before, but go look at this UNCTAD statistics for the size of the consumer market inside China in 1970. I mean, people were literally lucky to be eating dirt sandwiches in China. And before that, when I talk over here in Penang to people about their background, because I'm just interested how long was your family here, and they explain that to come to Singapore and come to Penang in the 60s, I mean, you had nothing here. I mean, Penang actually had more than Singapore, but yet it wasn't very developed. Poverty in China was mind-numbing. I mean, people literally sold their children. They had nothing to eat, right? And so now you look at China today, and it's certainly a respectable rival to the United States. And then you ask yourself, why was Obama, why were Obama and the Bush family and the Bidens and the Clintons, why were they doing what they did to sell out America? Why did the British forfeit their property rights to Hong Kong? Why did they do that? Who was paid off to make that decision? Because that was a crazy decision.
Why did they do that?
Well, because I think the Chinese were smart. They said, look, how much is it going to cost us to buy off the Prime Minister of the UK? Let's figure out how to do it. Let's buy off Oxford and Cambridge. Let's buy off the media. we're playing a long game here, and it's not our money anyway. So this has been going on for a long time. You look at the Biden spectacle now, and think back to what it was like when we were doing our podcast. I was fearful, dialed back some of my criticism because, the Biden regime, the Obama-supported Biden regime, was naked in what they were doing to anybody who would challenge him. You have that book by Joe Manchin, a senator, a Democrat senator, saying that his life and his family's lives were threatened. It's ridiculous that we tolerated this. It's frankly ridiculous that Trump, with everything to lose now, I mean, he's clearly on the back nine of life, and he's got 5 kids, all of whom are very wealthy. If Eric's small penis and AOC and these people gain control of the federal government in 2029, the Trumps are finished. And I've been talking. I know it's not about Charlie Kirk, and we'll get to Charlie Kirk in a second. But when you think about what's happening in the revelations here with Arctic frost, first it was 9 people were targeted, 8 senators, 1 congressperson, by Jack Smith and Garland and others. Then it became 160. Today it's 460. This is in a matter of a week. It's gone from 9 to 460 people were targeted by Garland, Wray, and the Biden regime, and likely Obama, with this Jack Smith, who is a despicable human being. You look into his record. I mean, what he did in the office of whatever it is, ethics or public integrity or whatever it was, the Justice Department was outrageous. And he replaced somebody. Holder got rid of somebody. Obama and Holder got rid of somebody who was deemed to be too outrageous even for them, and replaced that idiot with Jack Smith. And then Jack Smith went on a rampage. And look, you're innocent till proven guilty in this country. I get it. But what has happened to people like Jerry Corsi, to you, to others, I think back to my interview with those idiotic FBI agents in December 2018, just as Clarissa lay dying. Literally, as I get a call, Clarissa's going to die shortly. Next call is the FBI wants to see me.
Do you think they knew about that, Charles? Maybe they're like, "Oh, get him now," while his emotionally.
Maybe, and it's just, this idea, and you see it in the Bill Gates. I know I'm going all over the place here, but Bill Gates pontificating about climate change, spending billions supporting these climate kooks, that causes Mike Bloomberg to jump on the climate doom plane, as he's flying his helicopters and private planes that he owns around the world to his various mansions. Suddenly Gates says, on second thought, climate change not a thing, not something to worry about. People, you don't get to do that. You don't get to spend 20 years, pounding the table, financing professors to shape a climate agenda that's 100% wrong, and is now dooming Europe to serfdom. Because these climate kooks, Bill Gates said, we can go to another private party and have some Gates caviar and champagne, telling all the peasants that they better live in 15-minute cities. So, when you have this cult-like thinking, the people who are in the business of shaping public opinion, they understand that. And they saw, I believe, first in O'Keefe at Project Veritas, they destroyed him. And before that, they frankly destroyed the heart of Fox News. They got Roger Ailes, they got Bill O'Reilly, they got a bunch of the major talent was pumped out of Fox. They neutered Fox, leaving it where it is today. And neutered, I would argue it's barely conservative at this point, trying to be like the other legacy networks. And so they neutered O'Keefe. And maybe O'Keefe has some issues. I have questions about him, but his Project Veritas was very effective, breaking massive stories. And O'Keefe Media Group is continuing in that image. Charlie Kirk, was a force for excellence, frankly, while he was alive. Your choice of your religion, that's between you and that's your choice. I have nothing to say about it. If you want to flaunt your religion, I wouldn't do that, but people will do that. Those gold cross makers, they got to make money. They got to pay college tuition bills and stuff. But anyway, the Charlie Kirk, by bravely going into these hellholes that pass for educational institutions, and not standing up there Ann Coulter like, I like Ann, but I mean she's in the business of clickbaiting and making a spectacle and saying outrageous things, and publishing books that push the needle. Kirk, in contrast, would go onto these campuses and say, "I want to understand your opinion. Why don't you explain your views, and then I will react." I mean, that was a really almost saintly thing to do, to go into the belly of the beast and hand the microphone over to these blue-haired maniacs with nose piercings and tattoos all over the place, to let them lecture you about climate change or whatever they want to talk about, and then take their arguments apart. That's true education and bravery. And I think he moved the needle in the 2024 election. Trump won the youth vote.
Charles, I don't disagree with anything that you're saying, but something that really has been kind of on my mind the past couple days, now that we're, a month and a half after the murder of Charlie Kirk. He was an important guy for all the reasons that you're saying, but he wasn't a senator. He wasn't a president, a former president, a presidential candidate. And there's something happening right now around the information about his murder that's maybe unlike anything we've ever seen before in terms of the cover-ups, the social engineering, all the stuff around it. And a lot of people
what I'm saying to you, I hear you. What I'm saying, I may even agree with you here. What I'm saying is, if you assume that the classified objectives of our federal government at the highest level have been to manage public opinion, right? That's the national security interest of the United States. We can't let the public know the truth. The opposite of crowdsource the truth, right? burythetruth.org. The program of going after 435 congresspeople and 100 senators and 9 Supreme Court justices, and you pick the number of state level and city level people, that's easily managed by an FBI with 35,000 people in it. Very easy to manage, and it's very easy to let individual senators and House people understand just how vulnerable they are in a looming election. On the other hand, it's not so easy to manage all the students on campi. I mean, remember, those students have made a decision not to become car mechanics, not to become construction workers or whatever, and from amongst them, you will end up with the future senators and whatever. And so, to have a mission of controlling public opinion is, I think, entirely consistent with what we imagine the deep state is. That's why they're so damn cocky. They know, the deep state actually knows every single published book that's going to come into the public domain. They see it before the public sees it. They know which books to push and which to suppress. They have the ability to stop books from being published. They have the ability to take an idiotic book written by Bill Clinton and give him 15 million, and have every New York Times book review person to write a gushing book review about how wise and same thing with Obama. So Charlie Kirk was a threat to all that, and he was young, right? I mean, if he had been allowed to live a full life, who knows what would have happened? In some ways, why I'm so passionate about this, I have here a book by Luke Calloway, who was he became the Chief Justice of the Montana Supreme Court. And he writes glowingly about, and in fact, in that book is a picture I'd never seen before of my great-grandfather, Austin Carlos Gormley, who was in his law class. And Austin sadly died at age 42 of appendicitis on a fishing expedition around White Sulphur Springs, where his in-laws had a bunch of land. and other interests. And he died at 42. And, it just shook Lou Calloway, who lived into his late 80s, because he felt that Austin was on a path to be a senator, and from there, possibly be president of the United States. I think, Kirk might have become president of the United States. And not only that, he might have had, you think about William Jennings Bryan, who was another populist politician, trust-busting, populist, who ran for president a few times as an independent and lost. He might have been somebody like William Jennings Bryan, or more. He might have been president for 8 years. He might have inspired, a whole bunch of followers.
Now, once again, Charles, sorry to interject, but I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. But even given all that, it still seems like an unprecedented, like just a few hours ago, we're hearing there's this whole big deal going on that the FBI is, Kash Patel opposing Tulsi Gabbard and that guy, what's his name, Kent? What's his name? They're trying to take over the investigation, and Kash Patel is saying no. Strongly opposed the proposal to make the Office of the Director of National Intelligence the lead counterintelligence agency for the federal government. He's against it. Joe Kent and
Joe
Tulsi
Kent
Gabbard.
I interviewed Joe Kent. He was somebody who ran for Congress in, I think, Washington, and lost. And I think he has some kind of military background, doesn't he?
I think so.
Yeah. But
I've just started hearing about him recently. He's definitely.
This whole idea of national security. I mean, the oath that fop John Kerry had at least one thing right when he said national security is purely and simply economic security for individuals. If individuals do not feel that they can make enough money to save for retirement, to live comfortably, to enjoy their families and grow, there is no national security. If you set up a society where people are praised, and examples are set, for example, with Obama, who is rich today because he's a nuisance, right? As a community organizer, it's nothing more than a nuisance. Right, I'm gonna send people with bullhorns and 1960s typed up slogans to your house at night unless you give me what I want. And by the way, I have a nonprofit over here that I'm going to soak for as much money as I can get. So, but on Charlie Kirk, what we've discussed in the last, and I think we'll save this for the paid people, but what we discussed in our previous broadcast is that there are major league questions about the finances and filings of the various Turning Point itself and the various allied organizations and the various for-profit entities, which Charlie and his wife and others seem to have had. There's legitimate questions about all that, and the public has a right to understand what's going on here. And the second you open a national security level, or whatever they call it, investigation, that gives the investigators the ability to sweep under the rug the pesky details that you and I might want to examine. I think there should be a proper murder investigation here.
Yeah. It's interesting, Charles. You and I, when we did that episode exploring specifically the nonprofits and everything, we had that Charlie Kirk email that had been sent to me by Brian Ferentz. I didn't realize this at the time, but Brian has been doing a lot of research into Turning Point USA. Maybe it was last night, but I saw it this morning. Brian appeared on Redacted. He's had me on his Magamind podcast. He seems a decent guy. I don't know him that well. We've communicated a little bit, but we seem to agree on quite a few things. And he's got really some very interesting research into Turning Point USA, and specifically this guy, Tyler Bowyer, however you pronounce his name. This guy's been accused of all kinds of, I don't want to misspeak, but either sexual harassment, sexual assault, and Brian presented evidence of quite a lot of cover-ups.
Yeah, I mean, something is wrong. Look, when you get when an organization is targeting the campi, right? You've got a lot of students with student loans who are, trying. Charlie Kirk basically didn't go to college, right? I mean, he just started this organization, and it became a major factor, throwing a lot of money around. You're a college student in debt, and you don't have a job. Um, some of you are going to do anything you can do to get into the income stream. And there's a lot of hormones flying around on those campuses, and there's a lot of potential for mayhem and mischief. And you're talking about young kids,
Well, that's
out of the home, out of the home for the first time.
that's where a lot of this went to, that they were hiring like hot young college girls to be in the thing,
right.
and then sexually assaulting them and then hitting them with lawsuits saying, oh, you signed a non-disclosure agreement, so don't disclose the sexual assault, alleged sexual assault.
Look, and that happens.
Don't
I mean, Washington, D.C. is a cauldron for that.
Yeah.
These state capitals are cauldrons for all that. It's one of the oldest stories ever. I mean, Adam and Eve and all that. I mean, it's the temptations that you and don't talk about. That's before we bring up the number of salacious scandals involving religious organizations of all descriptions, all religions. There are sordid tales of people in positions of influence taking advantage of the congregations, whatever you want to call them, the flock.
And just to be clear, if I understand your position on this, and certainly this is my position on it, I know we have a lot of people who are religious. We're not trying to say that religion does this.
Right.
It's that con artists disguise themselves as religious people to go into these organizations and do unscrupulous things. And that's what some of these allegations were, that there were people, I haven't heard people actually accusing Charlie Kirk of this, but again, today it was Brian who said that after Charlie Kirk's death, it seems like this audit that was supposed to go into all this financial impropriety has been, I guess, canceled.
Well, it can't be canceled.
What do you mean?
Right? It has to happen.
Well,
absolutely has to happen. I mean, look, the not-for-profit world, it has been. I mean, when I, back in 2015, when I wrote that story for Breitbart about the Clinton Foundation, and then Peter, not knowing that Peter Schweitzer had his book coming out 2 months later, or a month later. It was out there for me to level the type of accusations I was leveling. People were dumbfounded that a presidential charity would be this poorly run and this boldly fraudulent. But now I think, after doing this for 10 years or 11 years now, I guess, I think it's become more an accepted principle that, most charities have very bad elements associated with them. And big ones, particularly any big charity that's involved in international operations, belongs under the microscope. Any big charity with chapters, like Turning Point, belongs under the microscope, because chapters are tough. I mean, who's to say how much money actually goes towards the chapter? Who's to say how the chapter spends that money? Is a beer blast a legitimate charity operation? Should you be taking money in from gullible people at the door in cash? Is it clear that at the end of a party, that all the food and alcohol that you bought for the party, what do you do with it? Do you throw it out? You hand it out to your friends? How do you account for all that? And so you're talking about college kids, who need spending money.
A lot that can go wrong. Charles, we're close to the end of our segment here, but we're going to continue and go on a deep dive into the financial documents and all the stuff that people love to see you do on the sponsor exclusive segment in the First Amendment Forum. People can join us for that on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com or on subscribestar.com or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Also, people who follow me on X at JG_CSTT and subscribe there are going to get access to the sponsor exclusive content. I also wanted to let you know, Charles, this evidence bounty that I've been running, the purpose of which is to invite any expert in any field, not to come at me with some cockamamie idea, but to present countermanding evidence and a counter thesis that would disprove the evidence that I've laid out that causes me to say that Charlie Kirk was shot from behind by a projectile traveling at 500 feet per second. A lot of people have just decided they don't like this and it's debunked, and they cite a lot of other invalid evidence. But there's been a recent surge in people who believe that I'm correct, and to show their support for Crowdsource the Truth, those viewers have gone to crowdsourcethetruth.org. They've boosted this bounty to $4,314, and there's still just about a week left, a few days until November 4th. If experts in any field feel like they can disprove what I've said about this, they could retrieve this bounty. Likewise, people who want to add to the bounty can go onto the website there, and using either cryptocurrency or their credit cards, they can add to the bounty any amount that they choose. Again, the one thing that I remind the people who want to challenge the bounty of is that you can't just say, oh, I have some other idiotic theory. You really are going to need to understand, first of all, what it is that I'm saying, that a 240 hertz mode of the iPhone was used to record that video, and it's 240 subframe per second sampling that resulted in that imagery. I go into the details in this article, citing the iPhone initial release of Dolby Vision HDR and the Dolby patent. So,
Right.
People who think that I've made this up or have defamed me by saying I'm misleading people obviously haven't read this. But that's not going to be the focus of what we talk about in the next segment. Charles has a lot to discuss about the abuse of charities. We're going to look at the 990s for Turning Point and a couple of other things. So please join us over there in the First Amendment Forum. We'll be right back, and thanks to everybody who's been supporting the show by whatever method you choose. Stay with us. We'll be